Okay, this will be number 2 video. Today I'm going to do 2 or 3 like that. I wasn't going to make this. I just got out of church down the street. And I thought, maybe I'll walk down by the courthouse, which is right past my church. I've got 10 Commandments here. But instead, I was going to go to the flea market on Sunday. I do that sometimes. And I stopped to get coffee and a newspaper, and I got to get $10 over to buy something. And that Stripes I went to, they don't do the $10 over. Turn around a few blocks back to Wells Fargo, which led me back to the street of the courthouse. I said, you know what, I guess I'll do it. Here's your 10 Commandments. I wanted to just talk a little bit more about what I mentioned, that they had that murder early this morning on Staples Street on the Stripes. When I was just in the church where they did the Red Mass, which was a special mass for all of the law enforcement and judges and things. And so here's the courthouse. They have the county jail here, and this is one of your, justice systems here. But when I saw the picture of all of the leaders, judges, and all in the Mass this past week in the church I attend, I wanted to just mention that I know that a lot of the people that are here, prosecutors and DAs and all, judges, I know that because Corpus Christi, Nueces County, like a lot of other cities, are swamped with drug crime and gang crime and things like that. So what you have in these scenarios, from many things you've heard me speak about, is when cops can... I gave a case of a friend of mine by the name of John Cagle. John Cagle was the first resident that we had at our halfway house, which is only a few blocks from here. Pops lives right over there. That's one of the TV stations I mentioned in the last video, right next to Pop's house. So this is kind of a media center here. But John Cagle, one of the first residents, told me a story how, and these are guys that have histories of getting arrested for drugs or whatever. Pops has told me the same thing about Charlie Boy, who passed away. He said a lot of times Charlie wouldn't go out of the house because as soon as the cops seen him, they'd pick him up. And Pops told me a lot of times, which I'm familiar with, you could just pick the guys up and lie. And these are not maybe big lies, but they're like, my friend told me once, a certain officer. Now, all this I documented. This is all documented. As far as I know, they've not dealt with any of it. It still goes on every day. But a cop told him once, if I ever see you again in Flower Bluff, on the spot, you go to jail. And he left the bluff. I think he went to Port Aransas for a few months or maybe a while. As soon as he got back, as soon as that cop seen him, he arrested him. He never knew what he got arrested for. You need to tell people what you get arrested for. And he sat in jail maybe for a week. And what happens, the judges, this is why I'm going to talk to you judges and everyone here. Because your system is so swamped, I realize you just sign off on those things. Okay, here's a guy, Charlie, or John Cagle's story was, and I believe John, because John Cagle just told me, he didn't know I dealt with these issues. He was at a bus stop. I don't even think this was Texas. I think it was Oklahoma. John was a Native American, like a lot of my friends, Indian. But John told me he'll never forget. He said he was at a bus stop one day and a cop, and all of the officers know the guys that are addicts, and they get tired of picking them up. They get tired of having to get another drunk guy. They get tired of it. I recognize that. But that leads them to go over the line. And in this city, they've done it, documented, sent it off. They don't care. They don't care. So that's why I'm going to talk to the judges that sign off on that, prosecutors. They use the system in that case of that officer that arrested my friend. I've given the names already. I don't need to do it again. But what he'll do is he'll lie and say he'll do the arrest. Oh, okay, it's Charlie again. I'll give you an example. Or it's John Cagle again. And they can lie. And they do. And they take that lightly, that they make those guys sit in jail for 5 days. And then what happens, John? Then they'll say, oops, he didn't really have the trespass warrant we thought he had. Meaning the Stripes stores often put trespass warrants on the guys because they're there, they're bothering the customers. So no trespassing, you can't be back on this property again. And a lot of times the guys do go back. That does happen because they're used to it. So that's what makes the officer comfortable with maybe lying. And in many cases, I know for a fact, did lie. And say, okay, I'll pick you up. Sit 5 days in jail. And then after the 5 days in jail, they look at the thing, oh, this guy's in here for no trespass. Oh, cop dropped it. Oh, well, next. Now, judges, and all you guys I saw in my church, which you defiled it by being in my church. Every one of you that signed off on that, you defiled it. Because what you engaged in is injustice, and you're culpable. You're culpable because you allow those officers to do that. That's who I speak to you today. Thou shalt have no other gods, shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Thou shalt not kill, shalt not commit adultery, shalt not steal, shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. And every one of those judges that signed off on those, you're complicit because that was false witness that the cops engaged in. Now, many of the public, I get tired of hearing like people are shocked. I remember this last year I posted videos of cops planting evidence that got caught on video. And I remember it was a black person that it was involved, they did it. And they said, oh, like they see the video, an officer, oh my, he planted, this is online, you can get them from those sites. And they caught that cop planting drugs in a counter of a store, but the cop didn't realize he was on video. What happens, John, when they get caught doing that? They stay on the job. Also, the departments do their best for you never to find that out. They organize to hide that, okay? So none of that is justice. And I was not going to make this second video, but for those of you authority figures that do watch these videos, if somebody comes in and a cop picks up, like John Cagle story was, and I've heard so many, I know it's true, but he was on a bus bench. I think it's Oklahoma this happened. Shows you how inherent this problem was. And a cop that knew him, because he got arrested for drug problems throughout his life, said, what are you doing today? And John told me. He said, I'm just enjoying God's beautiful day. The cop, and John, he tells me, he said, man, he slammed that car and parked. He said, so you're going to be a smartass. Put him in jail. John, people don't go to jail. Wake up. Wake up. You get tired of people just being ignorant. They lie. They write a thing in the report. Either no trespassing or he was belligerent, anything. They're sitting there for 5 days. And then the cops, never mind, we dismissed it, and the judge just quick sign off. So you need to be accountable. You need to be accountable for that. As I deal with a lot of the world politics and world issues, we become smug as a people. This week, we really did stand down to Putin, the leader of Russia. And I'll tell you what I think he's going to do next. He went into Syria finally after the 5 years of the disaster in our so-called coalition of 60-something nations, which is an absolute travesty and a joke. But he went in and he's shoring up Bashar Assad, who we said had to go. And they're going to establish, because Russia put their surface-to-air rockets to hit planes and all. ISIS is not flying planes over there. What they're doing, they're going to strengthen Assad, and then they're going to give... See, Assad is still the leader of Syria, and the United States is flying sorties, fighter things over Syria, without the permission of Syria. That's a violation of it, without the permission of the leader of Syria, who is still the president and leader of Syria, which is a violation of international law. And the way we got around it is what they're going to do. Russia is going to establish Bashar Assad in that northern region of Syria where his base is. And this last few days, they've been establishing him there, bombing the other groups on the ground, including the so-called Free Syrian Army. And then they're going to put notice out. This is my prediction. Bashar Assad is going to put notice out. You no longer have permission, because you do not have permission to fly military missions over my country. And at that point, again, the U.S. is going to have to decide whether they want to actually have a war with Russia. I predict that's coming. And we might, because we've been backing down from a lot, the U.S. might decide the mission is now over. Watch, that'll come. There comes a day, we live in this country smugly when we engage in these countries. And people don't realize in Libya, there were black people that were doctors, professors. They weren't all a bunch of barbarians. And when we went in and backed up the assassination of Gaddafi, those people were murdered, killed, and they were put to slaves. Gaddafi was a friend of the blacks. People don't know this. Libya is there in the north section of Africa. It's in Africa. Egypt is in Africa. Tripoli is in Africa. All three of them are right there along the coast. And Gaddafi, of course, in parts of Africa, southern parts of what you have blacks. And Gaddafi was not black-skinned, but he was an African Libyan. He loved the black race. For some reason, that's why when Obama and others started siding with his ouster, Louis Farrakhan and others in this country were like, "What are you doing? He's one of our friends." But he protected the black people. And from the sub-Saharan, there were mercenaries, black mercenaries who spoke French. That's because of colonization. They all were speaking French, and they were backing up Gaddafi for free. Not that he had to pay those mercenaries. They said, he loves us. He loves us black people. So we ousted him. We were behind his murder. And there were black doctors, black intelligent people who had lives, jobs, went to work. They were put into, some of them were treated like sex slaves, the younger ones. Those terrorist groups that we backed up in Benghazi, in Libya, who are still actively in Libya, they did not side with the blacks. They were kind of like racist, those groups. And so they decimated that population there in Libya. Now, you and I sit smugly as we watch the news. Say, oh, well, this is another thing we involved ourselves in. And then when the towers were attacked in our country, many people from around the world rejoiced at 9/11. Why, John? Because what they felt, I'm not saying they were justified in rejoicing, but what they felt was we as a society just go in and do things that affect their lives tremendously in many countries around the world. And we don't think twice about it. All the conservative talk show hosts who are talking about, let's go ahead and fight Russia, let's go ahead and have an open war because this, none of you have been really touched. Imagine if a day came where a nuclear attack hit. They have the capability, Russia, to launch multiple nuclear warheads. None of this is a joke. Imagine if all of a sudden one day this happened when there was war and the whole city of New York, New York would be one of the major areas targeted, is gone. Every media center, all of it, gone in 1 second. So before the talking heads and the conservative and liberals and everybody else has their views, but they have yet not tasted it themselves. There might be a day where they taste it themselves. Seeing your home, your job, you go to Fox News Corp, you go to all these places, and all of a sudden it's all gone. That's what people around the world have experienced. All of it. Gone. Their jobs, their everything, because of the manipulations that take place. So that's a large scale. So on a small scale, I want you to know all the judges and courts and all, when you see the things that I speak about, or those who have watched them, these things do go on. And if the judge or any of you that were in the Mass in my church that you defiled this week by being in there, where I celebrate the Eucharist, you violated that commandment there, false witness against your neighbor, because you allowed cops, ones I've named, sent documents to the Department of Justice on all of this. So Flower Bluff is now famous. But you permitted false testimony to falsely put people, John Cagle, the others I've mentioned, in those instances, you're complicit with it. Okay? I wasn't going to make this video. I think God wanted it. I turned around.